Well, hello there, class, and welcome to the start of the second week of Unit 2. Hope you had a good weekend and that your Monday is going well so far. I don't know about you, but the older I get, and probably it's because the more full my life is, Saturday was all soccer and friends over from church for dinner, and Sunday was church and just life that happens, right? So things go quickly, days go quickly. It feels like we just started the class and it's already been a little over 3 weeks. So I guess that's to be expected. But I hope your week is off to a great start. And I'm just really grateful for your contributions so far. So you'll hopefully have noticed that your grades are updated from the first unit. So if you see something missing, let me know. There's a couple of things that I had some questions on that you may be able to fill in better than I can, so I don't have to go through and identify them. Just if you don't have a grade on something or you have a question on something, please let me know, and I will get right back to you. I'll be working on some things this evening, so I should be able to get back to you fairly quickly if you have a chance to send me a note. I want to talk about grades. I want to talk about feedback and expectations, and in doing that, I wanted to share a little bit, just a previous conversation I'd had with a student. I don't think I've shared this before, and then I want to go into where we've been and where we're headed, and just kind of all the things we're thinking about and all that. So years ago, probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was working on this class, maybe 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago probably. And a student wrote at the end of the semester, and they said, "Thanks for a good class. I wish that you'd given us more feedback." So, and I'm not getting into the full context of the whole conversation, but basically said, "I wish you'd given us more feedback." Or no, I think it would have been nice if you had given us more feedback. So why don't you just stick that away for the future? And there's some other things were said, and so I could read into how this was communicated, and I thought it's not probably the most appropriate way for a student to interact with their faculty member, their professor of the class, and talking about, why don't you just stick that away for the future? But with that, I'm going to respond and kindly, and I wrote back and I said, "Hey, thanks for your feedback. Just so you know, if you liked more feedback, you could have asked for more feedback, and I would have been happy to give it." And so I know what this individual was talking about. Because several years ago, and this would have been now 4 or 5 years ago, probably 5 years ago, closer to, maybe even 6, I used to spend, probably 5 years ago, spend hours and hours and hours grading papers. So we used to have a 10-page paper in this class, and I used to have classes that were, sometimes up to 30 students. I mean, just crazy numbers. And I would spend hours, and I remember this one paper, I spent literally 3 hours grading this paper because there were so many misspellings and incorrect grammar components that the message, I'm sure, was good, but the message got lost because the paper was so poorly written from a grammar and spelling standpoint. The order and the structure and all that was off. And so I remember sitting there and I can see it in my mind, sitting on my couch grading this paper into the wee hours of the morning, and my wife going, why are you spending so much time? And I said, because I want to make sure that I give them the most comprehensive feedback I can. And then she asked me this question that got me thinking. And she said, "But do your students actually read the feedback?" And I thought, yeah, that's a good question. So I started investigating, look around. You can actually see who's opened emails, who's opened papers to look at the feedback, and realized that the students just weren't paying attention to the feedback. So all these hours of time that I've been spending on this feedback, the students didn't even pay attention to, because what I started to see was some themes. And the feedback I'd given in one paper, thinking that then the following papers, they would correct those things. The same mistakes were still taking place. So what I realized is students weren't even reading the feedback. And so I started to back off on giving as much feedback. But what I didn't do, and what the student was referring to, was I didn't make clear, this is the reason why I'm not going to give as much feedback on your papers. And if you would like more, all you have to do is ask. So I tell you that because, one, I think it's important that we make sure that our communication is clear and concise, and that I think kind of, I would say, appropriate and respectful in that too. So how are you communicating with me? How am I communicating with you? And if you feel like, man, why are you being such a jerk? Ask me, send me an email, say, hey, I didn't really appreciate that. And I'll try and do the same in a very respectful way. I think that, yeah, this online environment is very challenging. Given that we don't have the opportunity to have a face-to-face, in-person conversation. And so sometimes communication, the actual meaning can be lost in translation, right? There's a lot that comes with actual face-to-face interaction. I think, I can't remember the exact numbers, but something well over 50% of communication actually comes by way of body language. And so when we don't actually see the person in front of us, like even this is only as helpful as it is until it's not helpful at all, right? We don't see somebody in front of us, I don't get the full understanding of what it is that's being not just said, but communicated. That's why when we have text messages, we have emoji, right, that we can put in there, So if I want you to know that I'm joking, I put a smiley face in there. Or we used to have JK, like just kidding, right? So communication is really challenging. But I also, and I want to be very careful in how I communicate, and I would ask that you do the same thing in how you communicate with me. I also want to mention that while you won't get copious amounts of feedback or, notes after notes after notes on your papers, I will give you enough to understand why you got something. So if you get a 3 out of 3, I'm not going to say, hey, you got a 3 out of 3 because of X, Y, and Z. I'm just going to give you a 3 out of 3 because you got full credit, because you deserve full credit. Okay? But if you get a 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3, or maybe you get a 7 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10, it's because you didn't do the assignment properly. And I will tell you what was done incorrectly. If you then come back and go, hey, I'd really like more feedback to help me better understand so that I can improve and do things differently in the future, just hear me. All you have to do is ask, please. And I welcome that. But until I know that it actually is meaningful to you, I'm not going to give feedback, spend hours on these papers unless it's something that you would really like that. So if you need more feedback, if you're somebody that's like, I really want feedback, I just love reading through, pages of notes on my papers, then just ask and I'm happy to do that, okay? I find though that the amount of, or the content that I offer up in my feedback typically tends to be sufficient to explain why somebody got the grade they did, and they can make adjustments to improve in the future. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Hope that makes sense. But yeah, worst case scenario, just ask, right? So the answer is always no. I always like to say the answer is always no if you don't ask, and you have 50% chance it could be yes. In the same way, you'll never know unless you ask. And if you ask, then I'm happy to provide a rationale and answer for that, okay? The other thing I want to mention is specifically, I would say even in these case studies. I started using case studies about 3-4 years ago. And I was talking with Vicki Ewing, the department chair of the MFT program. And I remember having this conversation, she asked me, she said, do you use case studies? Do you use vignettes in your courses? And I said, I haven't really all that often. And she said, well, I know that our students really love getting a chance to kind of, if you will, practice, right, to play, well, in this case, career counselor. And so I started to look around. I found a book, and it was a book written by Swanson and Fuad. In fact, it's the book where the case of Leslie, who's our final case study that we'll look at for our final assignment, listed in Appendix B, I think it is, in the syllabus. It's where that case came from. So it's this great textbook. And I started to use that textbook until I found some different ones that I thought were better. And students like you started to get to play, if you will, career counselor. So one of the things that you'll see is if you do the assignment and you show that you have thoughtfully and thoroughly responded, you'll get full credit for the case study, okay? I'm not going to give feedback and say, I think that's a wrong approach. Not because it's easier, and please hear me, it's not. Right? I'm reading through these case studies, I'm looking at your responses, and if you were to go about a wrong approach, like a blatantly wrong approach, like if you were to do something that was completely outside the realm of what a career counselor should do, I would probably let you know. But if you're approaching this from an informed, as best informed as you can be, right, within the next, you've only been in class for 3 weeks so far, so you're giving as best as you can an informed response, I'm not in a position where I can say you're wrong on that, because I don't know you. I don't know how you see things, how you read things, how you hear things, how you think about things. One of the, I think, the key traits of a therapist, of a counselor, of a coach, kind of the phrasing you use, is that you and I are good listeners. And so as you're reading these cases, you're reading into them in different ways, perhaps, than I'm reading into them. Perhaps that the person, if we were sitting in class next to each other, next to you is reading into them. And so your response is going to be perhaps different, or your approach, in fact, I would almost guarantee it's going to be different than somebody else. So what I'm not looking to do is it right or wrong? But the question is it thorough and thoughtful? Do you have this kind of marked, thorough response? In fact, if it's not thorough, I'll probably give you feedback. Hey, I need you to be more thorough in the future. this first time around, if it was not thorough enough, you got full credit, but I gave you feedback that it needed to be more thorough. Is it thoughtful? Did you show why you're doing what you're doing? It's kind of like in the new math, right? So 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. 4 divided by 2 will always equal 2. But I need to see how you got there, right? So what's the math that went into it? 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? There's a rationale. If I can see that and I can understand that, even if it's not how I would do it, I'm not going to count that as being necessarily wrong, right? Hope that makes sense. The exercises you'll start doing here pretty quickly. I hope that you'll, again, take these really seriously, because these are things I think that will be very beneficial for you personally. I think potentially they could be very beneficial for you in your professional realm personally, but I think you can also then translate them and think about how could I potentially use this in working with a client in the future. So there's a personal benefit, there's also a professional benefit, both for your professional trajectory, but also your professional work with other people. And again, I'm not going to say that's wrong, but I'm going to say, is it thorough, is it thoughtful, and did you actually do the assignment as was expected of you? So I hope that makes sense. So I've talked about some feedback, I've talked about some case study responses, your exercises. The Schwen and Bass, your thoughts that you shared in your first initial response was fantastic. Thank you for that. I can almost like clockwork just count on at least one, sometimes multiple, perhaps even all students saying, this is not at all what I expected it to be. If I was going to read some, kind of boring, stodgy old text, and the more I got into this, I really enjoyed it. It really made me think. It really caused me to pause. I hope, as you get into Schwen and Bass, you'll feel almost like it's a bit of a retreat. You're like, okay, I read all these other technical books, if you will, technical, right, in that sense, and then I get to spend time in the treasure trove of what Schwen and Bass are communicating. This kind of like respite, right? This I get to kind of go on sabbatical, right, on a bit of a weekend retreat and kind of dig into something that's so encouraging to my soul, that's challenging, and also helps me to think about things a little bit differently. I hope that that's your approach. I hope you're finding that to be the case with this text. And I hope that you're finding, even as you read Tang and all these other things, you're finding it to be enjoyable. It's a different kind of content than what you're usually used to reading in the MFT program. I hope you're finding that change to be enjoyable. I hope you would be able to say you find it fun. I hope you would be able to say you find it challenging, engaging. A number of these, I would hope, really positive thoughts that you may have as you think about the difference of this class and the opportunity that you have to really dig deep into something unique, and then kind of thinking about how do I then kind of put this back into practice and incorporate it into my work. And we're going to talk probably next week. I'll give you kind of a scenario of how I see this framework of career development fitting into the overall framework of marriage and family therapy, and why I think what you're learning in this class is specifically so important to the rest of what you're learning in the rest of your program. So look forward to that. Probably I'll share that with you next week. So of course this week you have your well-being response paper. So please read multiple times the expectations, the prompts, and the syllabus that gives you the details of what I'm looking for in that paper. And then it's due midnight of Sunday, so this upcoming Sunday, a week from yesterday. Let's do midnight. You'll upload that, and please upload that as a Word document, not as a PDF. Please hear me. Word document, not as PDF, okay? And then let's see, you should have responded or at least posted your initial thoughts on the Schwen and Bass content from this last week by midnight of yesterday. And then to engage with your classmates, at least 2 of them on separate posts, on their own posts, not yours, at least 2 of your classmates on separate posts between now and the end of this unit at midnight on Sunday. All right, so thanks for your investment, your engagement. Thanks for your commitment to this learning so far. Really enjoying what you've shared, and I look forward to all that is still to happen, still to come in the remaining weeks. So I hope you have a great rest of this week. Hope that you finish Unit 2 well, and if I can be of support or assistance in any way, please let me know, and I'm happy to do whatever I can to make sure that you're as successful as you possibly can be in this class. All right, have a great week, and we will see you online.